Good. Thank you, everybody, for coming and being here and being a part of things. My professor knows that I've already done this one time, but I forgot to record it when I shared it with you at council. And so we're going to do this again, and then I'm going to post this on YouTube so that Professor Cookston can see it and look at it. But you guys remember, just to give you a little bit of background, remember the LMT, remember when we first came in this room and we sat around the round table, and it was very much intended to be a team-based ministry, a team-based effort where everybody contributed and was a part of things. And we talked about the coveting team. You may not remember, but maybe this will ring a bell. We talked about the visionary team. We talked about the culture creating team, the collaborative team, the trusting team, the empowering team, and the learning team. We were trying to be all of those things, and I briefly shared what those were back in the beginning of this. And one thing that really stood out to me throughout this whole course was ministry teams that covenant to be in community with one another and have a central purpose are a powerful unit of ministry. Their power comes not from themselves, but from the Spirit, who acts to create their community, gives them a sharp vision for ministry, and binds them one to another. So I feel like we accomplished that with this ministry, with this Capstone project that we all were a part of today. And so here it is, the video presentation, and we've put together a few slides so that we could visually show you and whoever wants to see it down the road. So here it is, Capstone project. Remember the 5 phases of design thinking? Remember that? Phase 1, to empathize. We were trying to understand what a need was here at New Springfield Church of God. Include things like likes, dislikes, what we as a congregation love, what makes us tired, what do we long for, what is important in STOG. So we tried to tackle that with using 2 things. Surveys, where we surveyed the entire congregation, and I think everyone in here probably participated with that, as well as the 3 of you did interviews where you each interviewed 5 to 6 people and got a clear understanding of what people were thinking from that. So that's the route we took. Phase 2, we defined what is a specific concern or opportunity, and we came up with this statement that senior adult shut-ins have limited opportunities for communion, worship, and fellowship in our congregation. After much discussion, after much running, after a lot of time spent on the data that was collected from the surveys and from the interviews, and remember we spent hours tabulating and doing all of that. Chuck made graphs for us and gave us a visual and showed us those things. We came up with 2 possibilities. One was to work with our shut-ins, and one was the possibility of having some kind of crisis center, crisis counseling, crisis something that someone experiencing a crisis could come to and find help. And after discussion, we all felt the direction that was best for us was a senior adult shut-in for our senior adults. I've kind of explained this. Phase 3, ideate. What are the possible solutions to the organizational opportunity? And we came up with a couple ideas like day trips for our shut-ins, once-a-month activities at the church facilities for shut-ins, and then visitation teams for shut-ins, and we focused in on the visitation teams for shut-ins. Our prototype, we've decided to form teams that will bi-monthly visit with our shut-ins and provide communion, worship, and fellowship. All right, so that was our prototype. Our test was, we ended up with 5 teams of 2 that will visit our shut-ins twice over a 4-week period. And this is some of what that looked like. That's me in the Jeep, just in case you're wondering. This was to give my class and Professor Cookston an idea of where our church is located. And there's nothing around that whole trip, so that gives you an idea of where we're located. New Springfield. This is the LMT from left to right. Myself, Shelly, Rick, and Chuck. This is where the home of Joe Baroni in Master Nick nursing home. That's the outside. And that is Joe. And this is one of our teams visiting. Sherry and Shelly visiting Joe and his wife Peg. This is another team visiting Marlene, visiting with June. Patty visiting with June. More pictures. This takes us to Joe and Chester. And by the way, if at any time if you have any questions, just interrupt me and ask. I'm just kind of flying through this. This would have been Chester Queen, who's no longer with us at Whispering Pines. This is outside of it. Chester was a veteran of the Navy, and you can't see that from the camera, but that flag is a Navy. It says has a ship on it, and then it says United States Navy, which was very important to Chester. That is Trouble in Trouble visiting Chester, otherwise known as Janie and Gail. Yes. Then we move to Covington, where Jean is living, a very sweet lady outside of it. And that is one of our teams, Marty, visiting with Jean, taking selfies. Jean, by the way, we all know is no stranger to the computer and is on Facebook all the time.
Yes, she is.
I think when it was her birthday, and it tells you it's their birthday and it shows you the different, she has at least 3 pages that are hers. And then this is Dick and Patty visiting with Bob. His nickname is Swampy, and they're taking time with him. And that is the project. A couple of other things that I want to share with you is that through this process, we learned a couple of things. Remember, we started with teams of 3, and we were going to visit them more times than we ended up visiting them, but we decided that for 2 reasons. Scheduling is hard to get 3 people together, and also we thought it might be a little intimidating for some of the people that we were visiting to have that many people walk into their house. We had I believe 5 teams of 2, and then we also had a couple of visitation teams that weren't necessarily a part of the project, but that were doing visitation with other people in our congregation as well. What else should I share? The last thing that I wanted to share is one of the items on my outline is considerations for future ministry. Because of this, we want to continue on. It was important to the LMT that this just wasn't a one-time thing. And also we've had others from Ed Winkler and Carol have called in and want to be a part of it and visit. And they have, we're going to start to visit with Ron Smith, who we know is not doing real great right now, and that was needed for him. So with all of those things said, let me make sure, I'm going to read over the outline just to make sure I didn't lose a couple of things or miss a couple of things that I wanted to share with you. Our goal, one of our goals in our statement was we wanted time for communion, a time for worship, and a time of fellowship. And we found most of our teams were a little uncomfortable with doing communion, but a couple did. Jean, for example, and Marty Marty took the time to take, we got a little communion kit, thank you, and she took that to Jean, and Jean just loved it and was thrilled to be able to be a part of communion and a part of things. Also, just for Professor Cookston's sake, we've started live streaming our services. I don't know if you guys know that. And so people like Jean and some of our shut-ins who aren't unable to be here are able to log into their computer. I think Jean has watched it the last couple of weeks and been able to see it. We've had one of our congregation members, Barry Snyder, who is in Salt Lake City for work, and he's watching it. We had someone watch it. They were coming back from vacation, and they watched it on their phone when they came back. So anyway,
Jean has a friend coming over this weekend.
Jean does? Okay,
Yeah,
so
she's
Jean's
made a
now
plan.
inviting people to come to her room and watch. That's awesome. That's really cool. So any other comments or questions or anything that you guys would like to share? If I missed something, don't hesitate to share with us. How long has the video been going? 11 minutes? Okay. I think that is adequate. I think it was 10 to 15 minutes that it was supposed to be. So just that will conclude our video.